I wish there was just one place where you could get a message.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot, isn't there, going on?
It's hard to multitask.
On the whole,
Nicola.
The DMs and the...
Look, it's much harder for a big celebrity
slipping
like...
into Instagram and slipping into... And I never look at them, half of them. I don't look at... I'm very bad on LinkedIn.
It's hard for a celebrity. It's easier for the normal people like myself, but for
your
big
chair
celebrity...
has been left lower than mine, so you look small, so I wouldn't just start. Look, yeah. You can see how small you look. That's why I have that screen on. For the listeners, his chair is just at its lowest and you look like that you're really, really far away from me.
Well,
but you're not.
No.
Now, it's quite unbelievable that, the years have passed to such an extent that some of the Kinahans are now finishing up their sentences and coming out for feud-related crimes.
Yeah,
convicted and served their time.
Yeah, it is incredible if you consider...
The bosses are still free out in Dubai.
Bosses are still free and may yet be back, and all of that'll have to go on.
There's an element of, aren't you better with it over you?
Well, you definitely are. I mean, if you look at it, these people receive significant sentences. It seemed at the time, but we've had 3 of them walk, and we have 1 of them likely to come out in the next very short period of time.
So Dean Howe is due to be released.
Yeah.
Liam Brannigan has been released.
There's an Andrew O'Keefe was released, maybe a lesser light. And then another man who's a part of the Flashy Gang who we can't name for legal reasons, but he has been released as well in recent days. So there are 4 people that were caught up in the general Kinahan cartel. Certainly Liam Brannigan and Dean Howe would have been absolutely some of the people with the tightest relationships to Daniel Kinahan and to people at the top of that cartel are now back on the streets or due to be back in the next few days.
Yeah, and the big question is, will they stay or will they go? I mean, I was talking to a couple of contacts of mine, and that is the question. Is Liam Brannigan, for example, going to take a one-way ticket to Dubai or is he going to stay in Dublin? He's exposed. I mean, he doesn't have, I suppose, the associates and the protection he once did have. The power of the Kinahan name has depleted hugely in this country. Is he likely, is someone going to target him?
Well, exactly. I mean, Liam Brannigan's an interesting character, though, isn't he? I mean, he would be a relative of the first cousin of Frat Freddie Thompson. Frat Freddie Thompson, who's himself a first cousin of the Byrne family.
And are the Byrnes not the Brannigan's cousins? Are they on the other side of the cousinage?
No, I think they're cousins.
They're all
as
cousins.
Well. Yeah, they're
so
all
Dublin,
cousins.
isn't it? Everyone's a cousin of everyone.
And so Liam Brannigan, he would have played a role in the Crumlin Drimnagh feud. He would have, which has really gone on since 2001. So if you think about that, over 2 decades in or out of Gardai attention and attention from rivals. But in the middle of all that, he went back to UCD and became a student. Which was certainly a road less travelled for most of the Kinahan.
In archaeology, or was it our architecture?
No, it was archaeology. I think it was reported as architecture, but I believe it was archaeology. He was doing
and history.
Yeah, doing an arts degree. But, despite that...
Go back to that for a second. So they're all cousins, right? So you have Freddie Thompson, Liam Byrne, plus the late David Byrne.
Yeah.
You have... Liam Brannigan.
Yeah.
And Dean Howe now is a cousin of his on the other side of Liam Brannigan's.
Yeah, so he's a cousin of
Can you imagine what Christmas Day was like in that, wherever it was held?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, this is actually probably relatively standard if you look at organised crime gangs across the world. I mean, that's the best way to ensure loyalty and trust, which is so essential, is for people to be interrelated. I mean, it really creates a tight unit.
I suppose what's notable with some of these is also the fact that they're second generation criminal.
Yeah.
So you have Liam Byrne, whose father, James Jaws Byrne, now you're good on this, he has convictions for fraud, is that right?
Convictions of fraud, and was a target of the Criminal Assets Bureau and paid out in advance of his sons becoming involved in organised crime.
And he would have been a kind of an early associate of Christy Kinahan Seniors.
An early associate of Christy
around the
Kinahan's
forgery end of things.
Yeah, and also an associate of people like Martin the General Cahill.
Liam Brannigan's father, John Barney Brannigan, he had addiction problems, I think, during his life and passed away a number of years ago. But he was a figure known to Gardai as well.
He was known to Gardai. He'd actually died in a prison cell. He was serving a sentence for drug dealing. There was an occasion where drugs were found in the house, and there was certainly Gardai investigated if it was Liam Brannigan's, but ultimately his father was convicted.
And Dean Howe's father as well was also known.
Well, Dean Howe's father was actually acquitted of a very famous case at the time. It was DNA evidence was central to it. It was involved the murder of a guy called Francis Fitzgerald in Cabra. He was shot in his home. There was some DNA evidence was presented at the time, but it wasn't accepted. And this is back in 2003.
Freddie Howe, was it?
Freddie Howe was found not guilty. So it was a very famous case at the time.
So it's interesting, isn't it, that they are sort of, there's criminality all around them. And of course, they are living either between Crumlin or the Dublin 8 area. And at one point, the Dublin 8 area, and well before the Kinahan Hutch feud started, was seen as almost like, I think there was a report that there was something along the lines of 200 known criminals living within that small area. And that's where a lot of those, the families came from. Freddie Thompson's mother was living in Marylands, and the Howe and Brannigan families were living also in Dublin 8 around Mead Street.
Yeah, they were all living very, very close by, and a number of other serious criminals. I mean, like it's funny at this stage that's become one of the posher bits of Dublin, hasn't it? Dublin 8. I mean, Dublin 8. The houses are, they're become so expensive, and I think it was judged one of the hippest neighborhoods in the world recently by some US magazine. I can't even remember which one, but obviously a lot of these guys are growing up in or around the Coombe area, and see what pushed them into the big time. People like Freddie Thompson and Liam Brannigan was their association. Was two things really. It was the explosion of cocaine, the money to be made that you've written about extensively, obviously in your new book, Cocaine Cowboys, the explosion of money to be made. And then also the fact that they had these international contacts that were just there at hand. I mean, they had access to people who were directly importing drugs into the country. It was a totally different scenario than people in other parts of the city. And they became... Freddie Thompson, although we sort of talk of him now as a hitman, but he became a very effective wholesaler for gangs, particularly in West Dublin. But they had these family connections with people like Bomber Kavanagh, and obviously then with the Kinahans as they started to rise up.
So Brannigan, while he was active during the years of the Crumlin-Drimnagh feud, it was a hit attempt on Gary Hanley, a member or certainly an associate of the Hutch organised crime group. And it was an attempt to kill him at his home in November of 2017, which was sort of a very volatile time in the feud. And the hit team were Alan Wilson, a notorious criminal who we'll come to as well, and who lived in that neighbourhood. Luke Wilson, his nephew. Joseph Kelly, an associate of theirs. And Dean Howe and Liam Brannigan were involved. And Brannigan and Howe were somewhat offside. The actual hit team were Luke Wilson, or would-be hit team rather, Luke Wilson, Joseph Kelly and Alan Wilson. They were kind of the ones that were getting nearer to the target. It was chaotic.
Yeah.
I recall at the time they were months actually trying to go on the job because they kept sleeping in.
Yeah.
They kept getting pissed and not getting up in the mornings and this kind of thing. The Gardai were up on their phones and were listening in and had bugs in their cars. And they actually caught them 500 yards away from Hanley's home. They had just collected, Luke Wilson and Joseph Kelly had just collected a loaded semi-automatic pistol. And within 20 minutes, Brannigan was arrested nearer his home in Dublin 8. And was seen just as I think the cops went to arrest him, an illuminated object went up in the air, which was the phone.
Yeah, he tried to throw the phone away. So like at the start of the feud, if you look back at say, Neddy Hutch's murder, there was the inner circle of the Kinahan cartel are suspected of carrying that out. People that had been involved with Daniel for many, many years and had spent time with him in Spain. They've been arrested, some of them, but not charged. So they had their people on those ones. But as time went on, a lot of these guys had left the country really, and had, or some of them had been in prison. Certainly they were being constantly monitored. So what happened as the years went on, the Kinahan cartel were trying to basically hire sub-cells to carry out these murders, but they still needed some people to direct them that could be trusted. So we saw that with some of the hit attempts on Patsy Hutch. You had people that had no particular skin in the game being hired, say, from Finglas. They were just doing it for money, basically. They weren't involved in the feud in a they didn't care about that in particular.
Any personal involvement?
No, and so what you had then in by the time they got around to Gary Hanley, who the Kinahans were fixated on killing. He was one of their top targets.
Why were they fixated on him?
Well,
because it was they saw it as an easy target. Well, because he was living at home, had a small baby, and wasn't kind of moving about, maybe like some of the other.
Well, I believe there's something more to it, but it's not fully clear why they were fixated on him. It was obvious why they were fixated on Patsy. You can hear why they were fixated on Patsy as if you listen to the evidence in the Regency trial. Obviously, Jerry Hutch as well was a prime target, though he was out of their reach. But so they had to hire these guys in, and in order to do that, they had Liam Brannigan and Dean Howe directing operations. And you see that they were, certainly Liam Brannigan, from the evidence, the bugged evidence, you can hear at least the clear suggestion that he's directly in touch with Daniel Kinahan. At times, I don't know if that would be admissible in a court of law.
Well, it was admissible because he certainly repeated during the court case, which I think would have been the Wilsons were on trial, unless they were all went on trial together. I can't remember, but or did Brannigan ultimately plead guilty to this offence? Anyway, one of the trials, they played out some of the bugged conversations in the car, and some of the stuff that they played out to the court included Liam Brannigan telling whoever he was in the car with, one of the Wilsons, I think, about a conversation he'd had with D, as he called him. And he actually was saying he'd been on to D, and the D was fed up because the wife was pregnant. Yeah. So he was going offside to try and get a bit of action.
Bit of strange.
He called it. Yes, exactly. And this conversation, and it was all, how is D? And it was all, I was talking to him the other night. So, I mean, that was provided in evidence, although it wasn't clearly stated that D was Daniel Kinahan. I think if you knew anything about it, you knew it was Daniel Kinahan out in Dubai. So he was obviously in phone contact with him and taking some directions directly from him.
Exactly. And I mean, that's the Daniel Kinahan isn't talking to everybody. I mean, we say, these guys, Kinahan cartel guys getting out, but some of them would never have laid eyes on Daniel Kinahan, let alone spoken to him. I mean, Liam Brannigan was somebody that was close to. I think we have a picture of them chatting away, don't we, at one of the weigh-ins?
That's right, yeah.
Liam Brannigan was constantly at those boxing events long before even the feud began. You can see him at the Matthew Macklin fights with the Kinahans and with others backstage. I'm sure you don't call it that for boxing, but so he was one of the people that Daniel Kinahan could certainly
and Daniel
trust.
Kinahan seems to trust very few, but when he sort of befriends them or puts them into his inner circle, they're there for good. Yeah. And I mean, you could count. I mean, I don't think Daniel Kinahan speaks to Liam Byrne. Yeah. And he certainly doesn't speak to Freddie Thompson, or didn't. Yeah. I mean, Freddie Thompson would have taken whatever crumb he could get. I think he came into his own, and you can see that sense of pride he has in the pictures of the David Byrne funeral, because he's nearly beside Daniel Kinahan. Yeah. But Kinahan speaking to Brannigan really shows the depth of their relationship. And Sean McGovern, of course, who is wanted here for the murder of Noel Duckhead Kerwin and is with Kinahan in Dubai, he would have been his closest confidant, and that relationship that developed somewhat secretly would have quite surprised Liam Byrne and Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, that it was such a strong relationship.
And similarly, Dean Howe would have been regularly over in Marbella with the Kinahan faction. Certainly back in while they were all based over there in the gym, he was a regular visitor there. He was somebody that had been also trusted by these people. He's suspected of helping organise other feud-related shootings, in particular an attempt to target John Hutch. So these were people that have been very tight with that inner circle. Now they're out. What is there for them? Like Liam Brannigan, obviously.
Well, they've one by one gone out to Dubai, including Liam Byrne himself.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't have that tight a personal relationship with Daniel Kinahan. I mean, he had come home from Dubai to visit family in Mallorca when he was arrested, and he's facing extradition now to the UK. But they have gone out one by one, and there's this very loyalist circle there with him. Bernard Clancy, Ian Dixon, named during the sanctions, along with Johnny Morrissey. So obviously Brannigan will be very happy when Howe gets out, because the strength in numbers.
There is. I mean,
there's two of them, but I mean, this lesser known hitman, O'Keefe, is it?
Andrew O'Keefe.
Andrew O'Keefe. I mean, he's not going to be.
No, I mean,
he's not going to be one of their people.
No, I mean, he was given an 8-year sentence for a failed hit on Kane Kierman.
He's a disposable guy who failed at his job, which was to take out somebody.
Well, he was caught in possession of a weapon. That's ultimately what he was charged with. So these people are a totally other ball game. Yeah. And there's a number of them that are due to be released. Similarly, the Finglas associate of Mr. Flashy, these guys are nothing near.
No, they're not inner circle Kinahan or Byrne organised crime group at all. And in actual fact, the three we've spoken about, Alan Wilson, who got 6 years for this plot, Luke Wilson, who got 11 because he was caught with the gun, and Joseph Kelly, who got 6 years. They again are just absolutely disposable to the Kinahan organisation and the likes of Brannigan, who they just hired them. They had no friendship with them. No. They were useful to them at a particular time, and they don't really care.
No,
if they get out or what's going to happen to them.
So we will see, these. There's two guys that are free men now, like Dean Howe and Liam Brannigan. They've served their sentence. They are free to go. Now, do they stay in Ireland? Does the Kinahan cartel have a role in Ireland?
Does it try to rebuild?
Does it try to rebuild?
And do they try to, rebuild a grouping in that sort of Dublin 8 / Crumlin area with, they're 40, certainly Liam Brannigan is 40 now. Have they another generation under them coming of age now? And will they try and oversee the rebuilding of a grouping?
Yeah, and are they would be trusted to take direction directly, and obviously they've served their prison sentences and haven't spoken.
So or did they go straight? Sorry, we forgot about that.
Well, you see, this is the other thing. I mean, Liam Brannigan certainly seems to have at times dropped out of the picture in a way that, like his cousin Fat Freddy never did, for example. He seems to obviously have gone to UCD. He seems to have, not been prominent at times. There was other times he was dragged into the Crumlin Drimna feud-related incidents. So it is a complicated picture. I mean, it's hard for these guys. Liam Brannigan is obviously on the front of the Sunday World picture coming out of prison. And so what is there for somebody who's 40 coming out of prison and notorious for out of his own, obviously?
Well, Graham the Wig Whelan has proved there's life in the old dog yet. I mean, he has reinvented himself somewhat. He's in a relationship with Conor McGregor's sister. He looked as if he was on the scrap heap. He was in and out of prison for a short period of time recently. But he seems to be certainly still, I suppose, and will always remain under surveillance and a watching brief kept over him, given his long history with the Kinahan organised crime group and his long history with crime. But he doesn't look as if he's doing anything too exciting at the moment, does he?
No, he doesn't. And I mean, this is it. Like there are a lot of people due to come out.
They get fed up of it.
Well, they may well get fed up of it. I mean, nobody is going to enjoy being in prison for that period of time. I mean, Liam Brannigan was, of course, he did. While
he might feel safer in there, though.
Well, I think, I don't know, is like...
coming out without that backing, without that mob.
Yeah, but are these active threats? I mean, I'm not saying there's no threat.
Is there any sort of desire in the Hutch organised crime group to go for any of these guys again? Or, I mean, my impression is that certain members anyway of the Hutch organised crime group are sitting back with patience, waiting for Daniel Kinahan to be taken down. And at that point then, perhaps the whole geography will look different for them. But until that happens, that's the great sort of, I'm not sure they're actively targeting any Kinahan members. I don't. And did they? I mean, they didn't really, even during the feud. There was Michael Keogh, a brother of Johnny Keogh, who was convicted of the murder of Gareth Hutch quite early on. He was killed, Michael Keogh. I don't think anybody has been convicted in relation to that murder.
No, I mean, the chief suspect, of course, passed away separately. But so yeah, look, I think neither side are going to want to
reignite anything.
Not reignite, yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, the intelligence that would suggest that nothing has gone away, that these sort of bitterness is so deep.
Yeah.
That it'll just be perhaps an opportunist's moment if it does kick off again. There's a kind of it's an interesting seesaw effect you see constantly. I did think after after Jerry Hutch walked free from that Regency trial when he was acquitted, I thought that was a moment when all of a sudden the Kinahans looked very weak.
Yeah.
And the Hutch, although Jerry Hutch himself would say he, is maybe a figure in the Hutch family, but that he's not in a crime gang. So he say the court was told differently by David Gallagher from the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, who said that the Hutch organisation was a fluid, familial, patriarchal organisation. But yes, the power is shifting all the time. I think if the top tier of the Kinahans are brought back and placed before the courts, that's the end of it, isn't it, for the Kinahans? That is the end of it.
And remember, the other aspect of it is that, I'm not talking about anybody directly, but as people come out of prison, if they're not in the drugs business, what do they have to offer, say, younger people who might want to come under their wing? So they have to have access to money, drugs and firearms, really, in order to be able to get an organisation going. And
you can still see plenty of money there in some of those places.
There's an ability to make money, but people have to put themselves out there. So
the wheels of justice are so slow, and even especially in the UK, the proceeds of crime sort of investigations that follow are so slow that you can see the Bomber Kavanagh, the Byrne organisation still have access to plenty of cash so far. They've plenty of money, they've plenty of wealth.
Yeah, they do.
In different territories all over the world. It sort of requires this massive kind of conjoined effort by police forces to see them as being a top target.
Yeah. So look, time will tell, but there are a whole rake of other people, a lot of them who pled guilty in special criminal court that are due to come out. And, it would not surprise if it caused a realignment of the situation in Dublin again.
Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on it. Thanks, Niall.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.